This has been one of the strangest weeks I've ever had in Washington, and I say that because as soon as we listed Ted Cruz as our featured guest this week, I got unsolicited research and questions, not from Democrats, but from top Republicans who to hammer Cruz. Why are Republicans so angry at Ted Cruz?
Well, because this was a strategy laid out by Mike Lee and Ted Cruz without any consultation with their colleagues. Mike Lee of Utah lays it out on July 9th without having ever brought it up at the Thursday meeting of the senators to say, we've got an idea. I would suspect today, with all due respect to my junior senator from Texas, I suspect this is the first time that the end game was described to any Republican senator. They had to tune in to listen to you to find out what Ted's next step was in the strategy.
Does this happen with Democratic senators? When Democratic senators get booked on Sunday morning news shows, do other top Democrats in Washington send unsolicited research and questions to the host of that TV show to advise the show on how to destroy their fellow Democrat? I'm sure it has happened among Democrats at some points, but not any time in recent memory. Why is it happening now among Republicans? The Republican Party is embarking on another shut down the government adventure with the promise that they may also try to make the country default on the national debt as well. And this is not the first time they have done this since losing the White House back in 2008. But it is the first time they are doing it while also publicly tearing each other apart like they're a bag of blindfolded, hungry weasels who someone dosed with PCP. Why is that? The party's unsuccessful candidate for vice president in 2008 is demanding today that Chris Wallace of Fox News Sunday reveal his sources, these dastardly Republicans who told him to hammer Ted Cruz. Senator Ted Cruz, of course, wants to be a Republican hero for mounting a filibuster in the Senate. But the bill he wants to filibuster is one that was just passed by the one body that the Republicans do control in Washington. The leadership of his own party in the Senate says they will not support a filibuster. But the base of the party, the fundraising marks, if you will, they've been getting fired up for months now, sending their checks, hitting the big donate button on the website, sending their automated fax messages to Congress for just $9.95 plus shipping and handling. They have had their fires stoked for months now. That you are only a real Republican, you are only a real conservative if you are willing to go all the way to burn Washington down unless you get your way. So the immediate question is, how does this end, right? Does the government get shut down? Is the credit rating of the country at risk forever because of whatever this fight is among Republicans? That's the immediate question. The bigger question is, why is this happening right now? And with such ferocity? I mean, Democrats are essentially not involved in this at all. This is all happening among Republicans. Is the country, the whole economy, the whole government at risk of becoming collateral damage here for a proxy fight that really is just Republicans trying to finally decide among themselves who their leader is, who calls the shots in their party? Is this a war that is about what it means to be a Republican in the post-George Bush, post-John McCain, post-Mitt Romney era? And if so, what are the rest of us supposed to do to limit the collateral damage to the rest of us while they sort this out among themselves? Joining us now is my friend Nicole Wallace, former communications director for George W. Bush, former senior advisor for the McCain-Palin campaign. Nicole, thank you for being here.
Well, I wish it were under better circumstances for my party.
It never is.
It never is.
I never want to talk about that stuff. You notice? Hey, things are going great.
We weren't here when Obama was, sucking wind on Syria. But
hey, you have to admit Syria came out in a way that is better than either the war or it was before the confrontation.
Republican Senator Corker said it's hard to deny that Obama didn't land on some solid ground. But I think that what we would be talking about this week, if Republicans weren't acting like they are acting, is whether this week we're going to see in any of the body language with Iran any tangible signs of our credibility on the issue of a nuclearized Iran having been weakened. I mean, that's what we would be talking about.
Our credibility being weakened on nuclear?
Well, we had the red line in Syria. It ended up not being quite a serious red line. We have a red line. I think that on the right and the left, we would be talking about, and we would be asking the question, and the question might have been, no, our credibility hasn't been damaged. But I think the conversation that we would be having this week would be America and the world post the Syria debate. We did have a debate, but we are not talking about that.
Because instead, these guys.
These guys. So I think that the damage to the Republican Party is on many levels. It's all fleeting because I think, as I saw just watching your show, events and news can overtake any story. So this will go away. This will go away, I hope. But what this has replaced was a series of stories and a series of events that had, I think, brought about legitimate questions about President Obama's leadership.
And that's about news cycle to news cycle momentum. But I hear you on that, and I think that's right. But I think there is this broader issue of what this fight is really about. Because you know what?
Absolutely.
They've hated Obamacare for a long time. They've enjoyed threatening shutting down the government and defaulting on the country's debt for a long time. But we are having it right now in this aggro, over-the-top, extended way that isn't going away, that is getting better and not worse with each passing day. Is it a proxy war for control of the party? Or is there just something going on right now that they've got this stuck in their craw?
Well, look, it's, you know, everything can be drawn to the movie The American President and some Aaron Sorkin fantasy where Michael J. Fox walks in and says, you know, Mr. President, people are so hungry for leadership, they'll crawl through the sand. And when they realize it was a mirage, they'll eat the sand. Ted Cruz would have Republican activists eating sand because what he sold them wasn't real. It was a mirage. There's no possible way, in the words of Charles Krauthammer, of having this happen. I mean, Obama is not going to sign a law that defunds his signature domestic achievement.
So then why did Ted Cruz sell it?
Well, Ted Cruz, I think, is far less interesting than everybody else thinks he is. He's just a guy who is in the Senate and wants everyone to talk about him. I mean, he's not
the opposite
really,
of love is not hate; it's indifference, and you are indifferent to him. You're bored by him.
I am bored by him. I mean, there is a really serious philosophical fight over policy on the right. And it's going to play out in the campaign. But it's not, Ted Cruz isn't going to be holding up any flag on either side. It's going to be Rand Paul running as sort of a libertarian Republican who on national security issues favors far more isolated America. I mean, you've paid a lot of attention to Rand Paul because I think, unlike some Republicans, you realize that he really is going to be a viable choice in the Republican primary.
He is a policy choice, whether or not personally he's a choice.
And I'm more with a McCain or a Christie, or I mean, I believe in more of an activist foreign policy and interventionist foreign policy, and there are strange alliances going on in both these wings. And this is a really big policy fight that's going to happen in the Republican Party. The fight we're having now is a big water balloon fight. It's no more serious than that, although it's going to do some serious harm over a tactic. Because the Republican Party actually stands with a whole lot of independent Americans in its dislike or disapproval of Obamacare. But this fight about tactics has totally crowded out what was a legitimate disapproval of a policy that even the White House seems to be struggling with.
I don't think it's about tactics, though. I think it's about it's not purity. It's about extremism, I guess. It's about whether or not extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, right? Whether or not this is actually, whether your threat to shut down the government to do real harm to the country is something that is noble, or whether that is something that is not noble.
So it's a fight about nobility, but not even political purity or policy purity, because you've got some of the most conservative members in both. You've got Paul Ryan, you've got Charles Krauthammer, you've got Tom Coburn, all on the side of not doing the Cruz proposal, which was, I don't even really from an intricate...
The shutdown proposal, which the House Republicans just voted for.
Right. But now in the Senate, there's actually no way for him to do anything. I mean, some of the House Republicans, like Congressman Tim Griffin last week, who was a former colleague of mine and really does sort of tell it like it is, put out a tweet saying, you know, what are you going to do? Stop talking, do something.
Right.
And the truth is, Ted Cruz has spent a lot of time talking to the media. His strategy is sort of to enjoy being vilified by the left so that he can go on the media on the right and say, oh, I'm a victim of the mainstream media. You know, he sort of sees the Palin victim mantle in the media, and he's run with it, and he's done it successfully, and I give him credit for that. But his ideas and his tactics for the Republican Party are losers, and I hope we move past them quickly and get back to a policy opposition to this giant health care law where we do stand with all Republicans and some independents in this country, and bigger and more important conversations like America's role in the world.
I hear you on this, and I know why Ted Cruz has to be boxed out. I will just point out that every Republican in the House, except for two, voted with crazy Ted Cruz to do this.
No, and he's not crazy. Yeah. I mean, you're crazy like a fox.
But the whole Republican Party's with him, so trying to box him out is not going to work unless they start voting against him. Nicole Wallace, former communications director for George W. Bush, former senior advisor for McCain, Palin, and Good Sport.
And sushi restaurant connoisseur.
Yes, who's given me some questionable advice on sushi
Think
recently.
on that.
We're going to be fighting that out in the break. We'll be right back.